The sound has been re-recorded. Hello, my name is Gary Hogan. This video starts on the observation deck of the Port Isabel Lighthouse next to the causeway to South Padre Island. This is a visit to SpaceX STARBASE, Texas. The STARBASE is 6.5 miles to the south. The west section is the production site. The east section is the launch site. At the launch site, the tall dark tower is the vertical integration tower. In the future, it will catch and stack returning Starship stages. The silver tube next to the tower is Super Heavy Booster 4, the first stage of the Starship. It sits on the orbital launch platform. Next to the booster is the large crane that SpaceX recently started to use. Further on the left are the GSE tanks. These hold the liquid fuels for the rockets. On the far side of the insert is Ship 20. It will be the second stage for an assembled Starship. To the left of that is the lower half of Booster 3, the only booster static fired so far. 1.5 miles to the west of the launch site is the production site. This is where rockets are assembled. On the far right of the production site is the rocket storage area. The extreme right silver tube is Booster 5. Next one over to the left is SN15. Next to that one is SN16. Then, more or less in the middle of the production area, is a big gray tower. That's the high bay, where sections of multi-ring segments are stacked to make a rocket stage. Between the high bay and SN16 is the LOX LN2 production tower. To the left of the high bay is the mid bay. The lower part of S21 is standing inside it. Further left, the shortest gray tower is the low bay. Hunkering down on the horizon between those towers are the tops of the various assembly tents.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to swing around to the causeway now because that's a pretty nice view of that. From atop the Port Isabel Lighthouse. Isn't that beautiful?
We are at SpaceX's Starbase production site, where they build starships. We are about 2 miles west of Boca Chica Beach, Texas, about 6 miles south of yesterday's lighthouse location. Boca Chica is one of the southernmost spots on the continental United States. Being one of the most southern points makes it easier to launch objects into space. The help comes from Earth's rotational speed and easier access to low inclination orbits, orbits necessary to get to the Moon or Mars. Being on a beach makes range safety easier. We are standing at the intersection of Texas Highway 4 and Remedios Avenue. There are no gates on the avenue, it's public access. At the far end of Remedios, you can see SN16. That's the Hangar Queen, the one that never flew. It was about 95% built, then SpaceX decided they didn't want to divert the time from the launch site construction to perform a launch that would be a repeat of SN15. Off to 16's left, the next ship is SN15. That's the one that went up 10 kilometers, came down, landed, and did not blow up on landing. That was May 2021. I would like to add that the first ship to try the 10-kilometer hop was SN8, and that was just a year and a week ago.
Tell us about these structures to your right over here.
The two tall gray buildings are assembly towers with the Stargate office building between. These towers are hollow structures with interior roof cranes. They are equivalent to the VAB at Kennedy. Sections of multi-ring segments are vertically stacked inside. The more distant tower is the mid-bay. This has been used to assemble GSE tanks and the halves of ship stages. A GSE tank is a ground fuel tank. A ship stage is the second stage of a starship. The near tower is the high bay. It is tall enough to stack Super Heavy boosters and ship stages. Behind the glass on top of the high bay, SpaceX has set up a viewing room and restaurant.
Okay, I'm going to do a 360 sweep. We're now looking on the Highway 4 as a truck comes in. Okay, and that is the 360 sweep here at STARBASE.
Yes, it's a public road. Just don't go beyond the end of the road.
Okay.
Getting back to the rocket display farm at the end of the road, the tallest silver tube is Booster 5. You can see the giant grid fence at the top. That's to stabilize it when it's coming back for a landing. This booster was only recently finished, then moved here to make room for construction of the next booster. It is not clear that it will ever fly. The white tower to the left is an air liquefaction plant. It will provide LOX and LN2 in the future. The horizontal white tanks in front of it are LN2 storage tanks. It is not yet in production as far as I know. Then in the foreground are various test stands. The one just in front of SN15 is called Test Tank Booster 2.1. It's sitting on a ground stand and has a big black ring on top. They're going to string ropes between the top ring to the ground stand it's sitting on, and then pull on the ropes like crazy with 20 hydraulic pistons. Basically, it's a can crusher test. They want to learn how much vertical stress the rocket tank design can take before it collapses. Whether they will test to failure or to just be on design specs is not known, but they will probably do this test before they launch the full Starship.
Okay, I think we're going to start walking towards this. We can get closer, so I'll keep this video running, and I'll try not to get run over. In fact, maybe I will switch to the other side of the street so that I can live to see another day. It is amazing how close you can actually get into this facility. Again, we're near Boca Chica, Texas, about as far south in Texas as you can go. Elon Musk, thank you for this. Do you want to go to Mars? Not sure I want to do that, but maybe you want to go.
We are turning now to look inside the mid-bay where the lower half of S-21 is being assembled. It holds the fuel and oxygen tanks. It's awaiting its wings. We are now at the end of Remedios Avenue. In front of us is Test Tank B 2.1, as mentioned before. It was built using recycled parts from scrapped boosters and ships. This is a stress test setup. On the top ring, you can see the ropes that will soon be dropped down to connect to the ground stand. The large black bottles placed around the ground stand are the hydraulic pistons. As of 2 weeks after this was filmed, the ropes had been strung, but the test has not yet occurred. Just to the right, the big tall tube is Super Heavy Booster 5. That's the successor to Booster 4. It's more or less built. except it does not have the 29 rocket engines installed and a lot of the rocket control stuff. It may or may not fly. Continuing, the tube with the wings on it is SN-15. This is the ship that went up 10 kilometers, landed, and didn't blow up. Again, this is the second stage of a Starship. Beyond sheer size, the recovery and reuse of a second stage is the major advance of a Starship over previous rockets. We're about to look at another ship that looks identical. The main hardware that isn't the same is at the top of the lower set of wings, where the wing meets the main body. There is an aero cover to make a smooth connection. Now we go over to the next one. That's Ship 16. Notice that the lower wings do not have the aero covers to smooth the connection to the main body. That's one way of distinguishing which ship is which. This one was being built as SpaceX tested and launched SN-15. SN-15 worked. They decided not to try to duplicate that feat. Instead, they went forward on building the launch site. Thus, S-16 never went up and probably never will.
Anything else at this location you'd like to point out?
In the center of the frame is an open structure made of small black and white tubes. This is the Max-Q nose cone cage, or the jailhouse. It is another stress test fixture. It is designed to stress test the upper half of a second stage. That is the cargo part of a ship that's inside the nose cone, the part that will eventually have a huge door. The test ship goes inside, ropes are attached, and a vertical crush test is performed. Further in the distance is another tank. That's SN2. It was used for pressure tests in March 2020. I believe it's now a water tank. The open-air tents are storage areas. The construction site is the wide bay. It is going to be slightly taller than the high bay next to it and twice as wide. It will be hollow inside and it will have 2 roof cranes.
Thank you. Now we're looking back towards Highway 4. That's correct.
SpaceX is known for stopping the build of a new object and then reusing the scraps. This test tank moving down Highway 4 at the production site was built from scrapped parts of Booster 6, which was never fully built. These 3 long structures are the assembly tents where various substructures of the stages are assembled. For example, conical nose cones are assembled in one tent, including the application of thermal protection system tiles. Also, this is where they store the Raptor engines before they are put onto the various rockets. You can see a test nose cone sitting outside one of the tents along with segments of stacked rings. Outside storage of partial rocket stages is common here. Clean room storage is rare.
Okay.
Off in the distance, you see a satellite tracking antenna. There's actually 2 of them. The second one is hidden behind the building. The antennas can talk to Starlink and can talk to starships if and when there's a launch. The antennas will also be pointed at the launch pad when there is a launch or proof test. This is one way to get the telemetry from the launch pad.
Okay, I'm going to do one more sweep down Highway 4 before we leave this position.
This is a close-up of the two satellite tracking antennas. Again, they are used to talk to starships during tests on the launch pad and during launches. The launch pad is about 1.5 miles down Highway 4. Behind the fence, there's a farm of 9 Starlink terminal antennas. This presumably gives STARBASE an independent, high-bandwidth connection to the internet. Moving east down Highway 4 towards the launch site, we stop halfway and look back to the production site. This gives a good view of the interior of the high bay. Booster 7 is currently being built inside. It is not yet tall enough to be seen, but will eventually reach the height of the door. Now we look east to the launch site. Going from right to left, first is the vertical integration tower. The chopsticks are pointing to the left near the bottom. Booster 4 is hiding behind the tower. There are lifting cranes in the background, not to be confused with flying cranes from the neighboring wildlife refuge. Further left is Ship 20. We see the leeward side that has only a few thermal protection tiles. This is the first ship to have 6 Raptor engines that have been static fired successfully. Looking small only because of perspective is the orbital GSE tank farm. Next comes the lower half of Booster 3. Finally, there is the suborbital tank farm. Look closely at the left side of the farm. That's a cryogenic vent in progress. In the foreground, the dried mudflat is part of a saltwater marsh. It is often filled with a few inches of seawater. We will now go to the launch site. I am standing across the highway from Stage 0, the focal point of STARBASE. Amazing how close you can get to the real equipment. In front is the GSE farm. These are 8 huge fuel storage tanks in 2 rows of 4 each. They hold liquid nitrogen, oxygen, methane, and water. Behind the tanks is the launch tower, the tallest structure in South Texas, also known as Mechazilla. It will catch the returning starships with the chopsticks currently near the bottom of the tower. On the launch table is Booster 4. To the side are 2 big horizontal tanks. They are also liquid methane tanks. Past the horizontal tanks is a berm that separates the ground support equipment from the short hop landing pad. That's where the SN series ships landed, some crashing in spectacular fashion, hence the berm. Far in the distance, that's Ship 20 and the lower half of Booster 3. And then at the far right is Star Harper, the Immortal. Star Harper made the first successful 1-engine hop. It now stands guard over the launch facility. Backtracking a little, this is Ship 20, the second stage of a starship, and will probably be the first one to launch to space. Roughly, the top half is the cargo bay, the bottom half the fuel tanks. It is sitting on suborbital pad B, where it has had several engine test fires. This is the windward side, the side that must resist the heat of re-entry. Hence, it is covered in thermal protection tiles. On suborbital pad A is the remnant of Booster 3. The full Booster 3 was the first and so far only booster to have an engine static fire. It was tested with 3 Raptor engines. Then it was manually scrapped while still on the pad. Finally, we turn to the launch tower and Booster 4. The tower was assembled from parts in only a few months in the spring of 2021. Near the bottom of the tower are the chopsticks. These arms will catch the returning stages. Halfway up the tower is the quick disconnect arm that will help stabilize the booster and fuel the second stage ship. When Super Heavy Booster 4 fires off its 29 Raptor engines, even if only in a static fire, it will become the most powerful rocket ever built. And yet, it is already obsolete. Not compared to hypothetical rockets being built by other companies, but to the boosters currently being built 2 miles down the road. Parts for Booster 8 have already been delivered and are being assembled. B8 will have more engines, 33, each engine generating more thrust. In summary, the year 2021 has been a groundbreaking year for SpaceX and STARBASE. 2022 promises to be a spectacular show. Enjoy the view.